I don't like being like overly hyperbolic, but I do like when people use some good, colorful language. In Brink of Collapse gives me some emotion. I'm a former ad guy, right? I spent 10 years, my first company was an agency, and I spent a lot of time with a lot of words. And I like when we talk about bringing the food system from the brink of collapse. That draws me in. I'm a big fan of words, and I think strong use of words there matters. And I think on pitch deck, word choice matters, and I think that's a great opener. I'm a big fan.
Let me give some contrarian advice just to
Please.
even it out here. When it's done right, I totally agree. When it's
Mm-hmm.
done well. But when I think Will mentioned it, and when it's so hyperbolic, I would prefer the founder just get to the point and say, we're a SaaS platform
Mm,
that helps people get food in food
that's fair.
deserts, something
Yep.
like that, right?
Yep.
Now, if you can combine the two, I've seen it done really well where they explain exactly what it is so I know where I'm going and they add some of that marketing flair. Then I'm like, ooh, it's like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, just right. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, Ed, here's what I'd say. I would say if Marc said, "Hey, you got two choices. Matter of fact, this is what we do. We're Uber for pizza." Or visionary, this is bringing the world back from collapse. I'd take Uber for pizza every day. Like this is what we do. If he were to say, yeah, but I think the emotional thing is what sells it, then I'd say, go with that. But
Yes.
I'd agree. My default would be just say what you do. But if there was something strong with the emotional tide, and that'd have to be a unique case, then I'd go with the emotional tide. But I agree with you.
Yeah, sometimes it works. It just work with your strengths, test it out. Okay, so I was sick while on Wall Street. While pushing financial success, my health fell. I turned to food grown in pure soil and got better. Happy for you. Congratulations. Will, this is your first slide.
Okay. I mean, it is the opening of a problem slide. It does bring in emotion. It's funny because that's the way I look in the morning and that's the way I look about lunchtime, like every single day. So I know that comparison well. But one of the things I want to point out, I want to point out, I'm a big fan, like I said a moment ago, of drawing in emotion. This is going to feel like it's opening up storytelling, which I said earlier can get dangerous because if this story runs too long, it's going to make me say, "Oh shit, is going to get to the point." Now, again, I'm reserving judgment, right? We're going to get into the deck. We'll find out in a minute if it runs too long. But so far,
A little pro tip for everyone. This slide, I'm going to point this out again. I love this slide. I love it. Here's how
okay,
I would use a slide like this. If I was pitching live, I'd actually blow up those pictures and have it one after the other. If I was pitching, I would start with this and, I would say, because it makes the investor empathize with you and helps you demonstrate that you've empathized with the user. If you have a personal itch, you're scratching your own itch, like you had this problem. So if I was pitching live, and this is where, Amar, I want you to maintain your flair. Don't lose your flair. We're not trying to strip it out of you. Just put it in the right spot. I'd open up, and if I was like on the Y Combinator demo day stage, I would literally put this live. This is me in 2000, and I was experiencing this, this, and this, right? I wouldn't even have any words. I'd have, 2000. And then I would put up the second image, say, this is me now, and here's what I learned, and here's why I'm here with this startup. That would be such a powerful story, but no
but if
narrator.
you're presenting,
Yeah, if you're presenting.
all right, let's keep going.
Okay, so next looks like this is, I think it's the problem slide. Chemicals companies are growing our food. So we
Well,
got some.
let's pause there for a second, Ed.
Yeah.
We got to talk about naming the slides. Super
Yes.
important. All right, let me give my little speech, guys. Every single slide has to have the name of the slide, problem, solution, market size, etc., in the top left, top right, if you want to go crazy, of the slide. Okay. Without that, we don't have the context of the slide, which is a massive issue. The example I would give you, it's like walking into a grocery store where there's no names at the top of any of the aisles, and they're like,
Yeah.
go find shit, right?
Yeah.
You've got to put it up there. Otherwise, again, you just saw it. It's like, wait, I don't know what slide this is. Huge issue. It's the easiest fix in the world. It's also kind of like a super junior mistake. Like when you see lots of decks, you can immediately spot a startup that doesn't have their stuff together when they don't have that in there, because any startups that's sent this out to enough investors will quickly get reprimanded that it's not in there, and then it'll come back. So it's usually kind of like an easy thing to fix. But moving on. If that's the problem slide, and Marc, tell us if it is in the chat, then let's dig in.
Let me add just a quick little note to what Will said. And I'm taking this chance to sort of talk to some of my trolls and my haters out there, because I've been flamed on the internet and people have said, no, Ed, you shouldn't give that advice because the headline should work on itself. If I need the word problem to know that this is the problem statement, then, blah, 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 blah. And to my detractors, I say, one, I don't think you've ever sat on my side of the table and had to look at like 30 pitch decks in a day. One.
Try it for one day.
Second is that you're taking for granted that people know how to give a good problem statement and to make it so good, the chances of that happening are so slim. And so you are helping me make some decisions. You are helping me go through this pitch deck. So you're talking about from Will, the standpoint that he was giving is this is a junior mistake for founders, but you're also doing it to help the investor. And I just public service announcement.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the cost of putting in there is zero. The cost to not doing it is massive. Why bother, right?
Exactly. Why take the risk? Okay, so confirmation. This is the problem slide. We got 3 columns going on right here. I kind of know where this feedback's going to go. I'll just read the headlines. We got chemicals. Companies are growing our food. Strain on food supply, centralized risk. Modern farming has reduced nutrients by 90%. I'm doing it this way because that's literally what I do. I'll read the big bolded text first. I'm not going to read the rest of it. I'm just going to be straightforward, just be very direct. I don't like to read all the little mini tiny bullets, but Will, what are your thoughts?
What I'm going to do, and again, I don't want Amar to chime in here because the whole point of these reviews are for the decks to stand on their own.
Exactly.
The goal of the review is for the deck to stand on its own and not let it be defended. And that's how we make these changes. The key with the problem slide is to isolate the problem to specifically what we can solve. We get into a lot of dangerous spots when there's anything on the problem statement for things that we cannot solve for. I'll give you an example. The most common problem statement that I get is something along the lines of global warming is a huge problem, right? Again, a lot of things map back. Well, that's wrong. I mean, global warming is a huge problem. But as a problem statement, you're not allowed to put that on there because you can't solve global warming. You'd be like, well, that's not true. I have a solar panel. It's 40% more efficient. Awesome. Then you can solve the efficiency of a solar panel problem, but you're not going to solve all of global warming. You will not remove freak hurricanes because you have a more efficient solar panel, right? Yeah. Like you have to focus the problem statement on specifically what you can solve for. This happens all the time. So let's go back to that slide. This is where I'll notice this immediately. The first thing I'll see is chemical companies are growing our food. Okay, and the first thing I'll think is, cool. Are you going to eliminate chemical companies from growing our food? And again, I know that's not true, right? And I know that's not the case. But that's immediately where I'm going to say, okay, well, I know you're not going to do this. So I already know that's not really the core problem that you're solving. But, we'll get there. Strain on our food supply and centralization risk. I'm like, cool. When we use your product, will there no longer be a food supply and centralization risk? Probably not, right? And I'm like, okay, well, then that's definitely not the problem that you will solve, right? Modern farming has reduced nutrients by 90%. When we start using your product, will all modern farming cease to reduce? You see what I'm saying? Like when we start to stack our problem statement with macro problems, we reduce our ability to solve those problems. So what happens is we have to distill this problem into the part that we can solve for. Otherwise, we create a problem that we don't solve, in which case, when we introduce our solution, it kind of falls flat. And so what I want to do is I want to pause in this because there's some other things I want to get to, but I want to jump to the solution so that I can start to map this back. Can we jump over there?
Jump to the solution. Here we go. Okay, so we've got more data. I think this is pointing out the problem. Our produce, yes, is the purest and most accessible option out there. So I think this is the value proposition.
Goes with organic greens with our soil-based vertical farms. Okay, dig it. Our soil is curated to restore the natural nutrient balance using regeneratively sourced ingredients. Okay, let me think for a second.
Let me just take a look. Okay, so it's hardware. Looks like a system. It's a farming system, right there. Actually, this is where let's just get some feedback. And before we go into this, remember, Amar, everybody, you are not going to be looking over the shoulder. You're not going to be in the room with the investor.
Hard. It's so you're like,
I'm literally looking at this pitch deck, moving from a plane. Like I had to travel back and forth from China back and forth, like 15 hours. I saved all my pitch decks and different things like that. I'm literally just looking at it, scanning it while I'm walking through. I'm just trying to squeeze it in. You are not there talking to me. But Amar, I just want you to put in one sentence into the chat and explain what your solution is. It's a system. It's a bunch of cabinets that grow food better than everybody else. Help us out so we can help you because this is going to be important. I think we can be a lot more efficient. But Will, while we wait for the sentence, talk to us about why founders shouldn't try and solve like 300 problems at once, even though they all fall under the same category. Why are we picking one?
Yeah. Okay. So I want you to think about it in a couple different ways, because I think what we get anxious about, all of us, we all go about the same way. What we get anxious about is that if we don't convince the investor in this slide that our problem is massive and it can cover every possible use case, that they won't get it. And then if we cover too small of a problem, then we'll never get to tell them the big vision of what we can do, right? Let me give you an example. Ed, let's say you and I had invented the personal computer, right? And I'm like, hey, dude, let's just tell the investor that this thing will be able to replace a typewriter and that people will be able to produce documents better.
Okay.
And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. This thing will be able to do a million more things than that, right? And here's all the use cases. And I'm like, yeah, but they'll understand the word processor part right now. Like that typewriter thing, like will make us gazillions of dollars. It'll be easy to understand. And once they understand that, then we can explain how then we'll be able to do other types of word processing or other types of documents like spreadsheets, et cetera, and then gaming and all these other things. But until we can explain to them the simplicity of one thing, we'll never like get an opportunity to explain more, right? Kind of like a land and expand, right? Founders come in and they're like, no, we have to explain the entire thing, like everything. The reason that fails time and time again is because no one has the capacity to digest that much. So what we have to do is find a starting place with our problem with the investor, you kind of a beachhead to say, here's a problem that we can solve now. Later in the document, either with our market size, our product roadmap, we can talk about how it expands to other things, right? But what we want to start with is where will we be the most focused now? We want to narrow it down a bit. Now, the second thing we want to do is we want to take all of these problems that we solve for and we want to stack rank them. We want to say, okay, our product solves like 10 things. Awesome. You get to pick 2. In this problem statement, on this slide, you get to pick 2, right? You list 10, rank them on which is the most important. Here's why. Number 1, most people won't remember more than 2, right? So listing 10 does you no good. If you can't solve the most important thing you do well enough for an investor to care, does it really matter that you do 9 more? No.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So the investor isn't like, well, yeah, you don't do the first thing that great, but it's really cool that you do 9 more. They don't care. So what we're trying to do is say, here's the problem, and we solve the most important thing really well. If you even care that we do more things, awesome. But what the investor wants to know is that you do the most important thing better than anybody. So we want to stay focused.
Okay. So while Will was explaining that, just going back and forth with Marc, so there's still some confusion because trying to articulate, I ask for one sentence, and I do this all the time. I say, what's the one sentence of your solution? And I'm going to go to this slide because, I was still a little confused. Oops, let's go back here. So it looks like the solution is this hardware and this system that gets leased out to businesses to grow this type of stuff. Okay, Will, so we're going to go with that. That's the solution. So if you had to go all the way back to, let's start with the problem. What would you say in terms of direction that Amar should be looking at to improve this deck for the next time around?
Well, first off, I mean, looking at the photos and the screenshots, the first thing I saw is, hey, that thing's pretty small. So the first thing that came to mind wasn't farming. I'm like, farms are massive with a voluminous amount of food like that. That's not, I live in Ohio, I live farms everywhere. They're producing a lot more food than that. That seems like something a lot more focused. And then in the chat, Marc said, we're helping urbanites access the purest food within steps of where they lived. That's way different than the massive farms that I live near, right? So I'm thinking that this is something a lot more focused, right? In other words, a smaller crop, if you will, right? A smaller harvest, right? And so if that were the case, and again, I may be murdering the vision of the product, and I apologize if I am. If that were the case, I would dial that into the problem statement. I would say for consumers that are highly concerned about health, we allow them to create a personal farm that dials in the nutrients and the things that they need that caters to exactly what's important to them in a way they couldn't possibly do because the farm system isn't accessible to them, right? It allows them to create a farm system unto themselves, right? But I would create a problem statement that would say, in order to get that level of hyper-local farming, you have to be in Ohio and have your own farm, right? Short of that, if you live in New York City, you'd have to have this. In other words, and again, I'm half kidding with some of this. What I'm saying is there's something about the form factor of this farming unit that's unique that I think should be dialed into the problem statement much more specifically. That I think the problem statement is
we are out of time.
A really cool product.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. We're out of time, so I'm going to leave the last word for Will. But, Amar, I look at this and I'm like, that's really cool. Like I looked at the pictures, I immediately felt the design, everything like that. So what I'm going to do is give you the ultimate solution for this. This is going to solve all your problems with your pitch deck. Go to Pitch Deck Doctor with Will Schroeder. Okay, just go. Yep. Go take his course. Go to you're part of Startups.com. And this is for everybody who's going to be watching this. We do this weekly, actually bi-weekly. Will is walking through and then he's teaching about funding on the other off weeks. And you will get literal hand-holding for Will. Will, give us a little shout out talk about why people need to come and have their pitch decks worked on with you in your workshop.
Well, first off, let me say this, Amar, because you were kind enough and brave enough to do that. Ed, if you can get us connected, Amar, I'm going to get on the phone with you. I'm going to go over your deck with you one-on-one if you're willing to take the time, and I'll dig in with you and dial this in with you. I think this is an awesome idea. It's an awesome product. Took the time, which I do appreciate for doing this. I'll take the time with you. We'll get this thing dialed in, and we'll get it up to speed. If you're down, I'm into it. And so, Ed, if you can help me coordinate with Amar, happy to do it.
100%.